Hello everyone, this is Nicola Pogson, Head of Alumni Relations at Imperial College Business School. I'm very glad that you've all been able to join us today. And I'd like to welcome Lincoln Coutts, Consultant Advisor and Speaker on Careers, Recruitment and Social Media. Welcome, Lincoln.
Hello.
So a little bit of background on Lincoln. He's an expert on social media, which is why he's doing this webinar, network and relationship building, and he advises corporate clients on the use of social media as part of their recruitment and development strategies, and he draws on 12 years of experience in the recruitment and HR industry. A regular speaker at conferences and business schools, his clients range from FTSE board members to more junior staff across sectors including financial services, FMCG, retail, technology, media, public sector and professional services. He's also a Talent Solutions EMEA partner for LinkedIn. And what's more, he's been wowing us with his zooming around LinkedIn and WebEx this morning. We've learned a few things, so we're very confident that he's going to give a great webinar. As probably you all know, our webinars are part of our ongoing professional development support to alumni, and do remember that you can always have a one-to-one consultation with our careers team. You can do that either via Skype, email, or come into the business school, so they're always available there to keep your career on track. We have about 60 alumni registered from around the globe. Today, our furthest one possibly being from Nigeria, and big welcome to all of you. A couple of details on the webinar. You can listen to the recording once it is terminated. That will be made available. There is the chat in the floating panel, which I hope you can all see, and that you can chat with and ask questions. Lincoln is happy to have questions put to him throughout the session and again at the end of the session, so don't hesitate to send them through. And that's all for now. So Lincoln, over to you, and we look forward to an information-packed session.
Thanks very much, Nicola. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending where you are around the world. We've got kind of quite a packed session today. We're going to be running right the way through for the next hour, making sure that we really maximize the time that we've got available. I'm not a huge fan of PowerPoint. So to that end, we've only got a few slides just to make sure that the information itself is very much run live. So we've got a few slides just to keep us in check as much as anything else. So moving forward, the thing with LinkedIn is it's very commonly known as obviously a social networking tool, but it's not the only one. Social networking itself and social media tools have been around for an awfully long time. And there's a slide disclosing, back in 1997, you had Instant Messenger, the chat system acquired by Microsoft, introduced to the MSN family, and very much kind of, launched some early stage social networking. Though the reality is before that, there were a number of systems around, such as GeoCities. Blogging software was launched in 1999, now part of the Google family. Napster in 1999 as well was launched at the same time. Obviously did significant damage to the music industry globally and certainly changed the way in which people work nowadays in terms of gathering information, particularly around the music. StumbleUpon and Wikipedia launched in 2001. 2002 you saw the launch of things like RSS feeds, Technocracy and Meetup. And the great thing with Meetup was that originally it was designed as a way to allow people who met each other online to be able to meet up offline. It became a very powerful system, though it wasn't really popular in the early days, but nowadays it's certainly a great way to be able to find events that are happening near you based on what you're interested in. Skype, WordPress, Diglicious and LinkedIn were all launched in 2003. Then in 2004 you saw Yelp, Dig, Facebook, MySpace and Flickr. 2005, YouTube and Reddit News were first launched. 2006 we saw Twitter and SlideShare. And the reason the iPhone sits at the top here it's very much that in 2007, the launch of the iPhone is probably the single biggest reason as to why social networking has taken off. Until the release of the iPhone, it was very difficult to be able to do things on the move. You had to typically be at a desk on a computer. So it was very, very much about making sure that you wanted to make sure that you could gather information and share information whilst you were on the go. we've just had a comment come through. I'll slow down the pace in which I'm talking. I'm not sure why there's a repetition, but hopefully it will be okay. So the focus today very much is around LinkedIn. So, what is LinkedIn? Different people have got different opinions, but good ways to look at it very much. If we start with Wikipedia, they describe it as a business-oriented social networking site, founded in December 2002 and launched in May of 2003. As some of you may well have noticed, it was 10 last week, so it's been around for a long time. LinkedIn themselves, though, they describe it as an interconnected network of experienced professionals from around the world, representing 170 industries in 200 countries. So very much, it's a global coverage. The 170 industries are defined by LinkedIn. So sometimes when we're looking at the way in which they describe sectors, it wouldn't be as we would just choose to describe it. But it's all about making sure you most closely align yourself in terms of the sector that you want to be seen to be working in, or perhaps rather the function in which you perform. But we'll talk about that certainly when it comes to profile. But it's more than just individuals. And as USA Today describe it, it's a networking site for professionals, businesses, and entrepreneurs. As a site, as a system, it's very much grown up, moving beyond just those individuals. And certainly in the early days, whilst its primary focus was to the individual membership, it's become a place to do business. And to that end, there's a lot that goes on within the site in terms of organizations, information, companies sharing content, potentially winning business off the back of the way in which the site works. And there's a lot that goes on within it, and we'll certainly cover those topics today. But for me personally, the way I describe it is a network for professionals with over 225 million members, allowing you to gain insight into companies, industries, and relationships you didn't know you had. And that for me is the most important thing with LinkedIn. It's a fantastic way to enable you to set out and understand who you know based on the relationships in which you have. If you were to take some time and sit down with a pen and paper, of course you'd be able to come up with a list of who you know, roughly what they do, and perhaps even where they work. But we have no idea who our contacts know. And until the launch of LinkedIn, it was one of those things that actually trying to do traditional networking was something that took an awfully long time. But with the creation of LinkedIn, and certainly the way in which it's been adopted globally, it's a fantastic way to enable you to see who do you know where that operates perhaps in the sectors or the areas that are of interest to you. And we'll certainly, again, cover that through today. So just a quick couple of points around really why people use it. For me, there's a number of reasons. The first is around building and controlling your own professional or personal brand. And the thing with your professional brand versus your personal brand is they have to sit alongside each other. It's no longer the case that actually you keep the two parts distinct and separate, because actually there's so much crossover in this day and age, where personal connections actually potentially become professional, or at very least they might be able to assist you in that case, and certainly professional contacts will become personal as well. But the great thing with LinkedIn is it's something you control. The downside to systems before LinkedIn existed was that actually there were a lot of things out there that perhaps created profiles about you that you just didn't necessarily know existed and or have any control over. But the thing with LinkedIn is it's a trusted tool. The acceptance is that you as the individual or the user are the person that's created the information. So to that end, it's a trusted site for information. It goes beyond that, though, and it's very much about your network. It's a fantastic way to build business relationships and, more importantly, also gather insight, not just about individuals, but also perhaps about organizations, interests, areas, industries, sectors that you're wishing to learn from. And for those of you who've been using LinkedIn for a while, one of the things I'm sure you'll have noticed recently is it's becoming much more of a publishing site. So to that end, they're trying to introduce new ways of being able to provide you with information to help you improve as an individual in your professional life as well as your personal life. And again, there's a lot of great insight that's being shared across the site. In terms of information, as I say, it's a fantastic way to gather that information, but more importantly as well, share your own insights, share your own knowledge. It can be a fantastic way to position yourself as an individual, particularly if you want to be perceived as somebody who knows what they're talking about in your chosen subject or field. It's also a great way to find or advertise opportunities. The site was never originally designed as a recruitment tool. But because of both the nature of the information that's shared across it and the way in which users started to use it, it's become a recruitment tool globally. And it's not just used by the largest corporates in the world. It can more often not be used by mid-sized and small organizations as a way to identify, potentially track down and approach key talent that might be of interest to them. Now, in terms of LinkedIn, globally there's 225 million members. If we split that down across regions, you've got 84 million members across North America, 65 million members across Europe, Middle East and Africa, 39 million members across Asia and Pacific. In terms of countries, the US is the largest, which is not surprising, with 77 million members. We've got 19 million members using it in India. There are 12 million in Brazil. There are 11 million in the UK, 7 million in Canada, 5 million in France, 4 million in Italy, 4 million in Spain, and 4 million in Australia. So it's very much a global site. With the Netherlands, with the 3 million members, it's actually the highest percentage of penetration of the professional population globally. If you look at the population of the Netherlands versus the 3 million members within LinkedIn, it's a huge coverage in terms of the member base. But the thing with LinkedIn is certainly not slowing down, and it's growing at the rate of over 2 new members a second. So it's certainly growing globally, not just within your chosen countries. In terms of information now, there are over 2.9 million company profiles. In fact, it's just shy of 3 million now. This is where an individual within an organization has created a company profile on the company. The great thing with company pages and company profiles are these are public to anybody who uses LinkedIn. There are over 1.6 million networking groups covering various topics from alumni to shared interests to best practice in fields or areas. With over 500,000 people joining these groups every day, and there are over 250,000 new discussions started within these groups. There's a phenomenal amount of content being shared across the group itself. There are over 20 new different news and content channels. This is designed as a way in which LinkedIn will stream information on topics that they think you might be interested in, whether it be personal development, whether it be leadership, whether it be general topics and information being shared globally. They also additionally have insights from what they describe as 250 influencers. So these are people who are deemed to be thought leaders in their field, subject matter experts, heads of business, heads of state, giving their opinion and giving their guidance. But the most important thing is to understand how the site works. It's based on the principle of 6 degrees of separation. So if I started with me in the middle, by joining the site, what I want to look to do is build my network. So whenever I send an invitation out to somebody which is accepted, that person will become a first-degree contact. The likelihood is it will be a friend, a family member, a colleague, a former colleague, a business partner. There will be some form of relationship there and some form of reason as to why I know the person. What the site will then automatically do is it will give me access to who they know, and they become a second-level connection. I'm also able to see who they know. They become a third-level connection. And by joining groups, the other group members become part of my network as well. The important thing to understand with LinkedIn is you're only visible to your network in terms of individuals. There's an exception to the rule, however, of the 16,000 companies that use LinkedIn as a recruitment tool, because they're able to see every member within the site. But you want to very much treat it as the people in your network, be it first, second, third, or group, are really the people who can actually see your information. But more importantly, they're the people that you can see as well. So we'll talk about ways in which you can start to create, manipulate, and change the way in which you set your network today. But what people see within your network is very much your profile. You'll have a headline, which for most people they don't give a great consideration to, but it really is something that is a shortened version of your professional summary. You'll have a summary in itself, which is very similar to a 30-second commercial where you'll perhaps talk about some key things that you've done in terms of who you are as an individual. There's a skills and expertise section, which is commonly known as endorsements. So you're able to get endorsements from people that you're connected to. And whether it's something you like or not, actually it's something you do need to consider when it comes to building your profile. With your experience, it's simply what you've done and where you've done it, roles, responsibilities, but the key thing here is to make sure your dates, your job titles, and your employer names match what you might have on your CV, particularly if you're looking to use this as a way to find an opportunity. Your education will be listed. You'll then talk about your interests, which will cover things not just work-based, but also things that you do outside of work. You'll have some recommendations, which is a fantastic way for people you're directly connected to be able to provide more detail about your relationship with that individual, but more importantly, what they think of you as a person. And again, contact settings. You get to control the way in which people approach you. A lot of people are very reluctant to perhaps use it because the concern is they'll be inundated with huge numbers of messages. The reality is you're able to control how you interact and how you liaise with the site, both with individuals but also within the groups or other areas that you choose to join. There are additional areas now which include things such as projects, languages, publications, organizational membership, honors and awards, test scores, courses you've attended, patents that you might hold, certificates, and also volunteering in causes. The thing with your profile when it comes to LinkedIn is it doesn't have to read like a CV. It doesn't have to feel just like a CV. It's important to make sure you get across your personality as much as it is in terms of the information you want to share about you in a professional context. But it's a great way and it's a great starting point to make sure that you get to control what's out there about you. Now, the best way to use it and the best way to show you is very much running live. Now, a quick question for you all, though I know we're not necessarily going to be able to get the direct responses, but something I would recommend is, do you Google yourself? The reason I ask this is it's worthwhile Googling yourself every now and then, simply just to see what comes back, particularly the way in which the search engines work nowadays and also the way in which sites operate. So, if anybody in the world was to Google me, they would come back a series of links coming back in terms of the results. The bottom link in the UK refers to a website called 123people, which is a site that's designed to provide information on an individual or a user, whether you know you're on there or not, but it's a way in which people can get photographs, they can find out your home address details, they can find out what social networks you belong to, perhaps whether you use YouTube, whether you feature in news and press. The information is available on the site, and it aggregates this information that's public. It's not just a UK site, however, it's available globally, and it's used in about 10 countries around the world. So it's worth Googling yourself to see if that comes back. If you look further up, obviously it's talking about today's webinar from Imperial. Here. We've got a 192 link, which is home address details here in the UK. There's a CIPD talk. There's then another one I gave last summer, the CII. It talks about SlideShare, which is a company that's now been acquired by LinkedIn. But it's a place in which people can store and upload presentations that other people can view. There's a funny little company called Coots Cues. They're a family business that manufacture pool and billiard cues. They happen to be based in Lincoln, nothing to do with my family, founded by some guy called Dave in 1999. There's Twitter, which I use so people can see what I say. There's a personal website, but the top of the results, it comes back with LinkedIn. And it's not by accident. LinkedIn have an agreement with search engines, but also they're a trusted site. Because typically if you're looking somebody up by name, the assumption is you want to find out about that individual, and given that LinkedIn holds information on over 225 million people, it's a trusted site in terms of content for search engines. So most people typically, when they look something up online, will typically click on one of the first links. So the first link here will take you to what I choose to say about myself publicly outside of LinkedIn. So we have here a photograph. You can see my headline there highlighted in blue, my location and my industry. Below that, we've now got a brief overview in terms of current and past employment. We've then got a summary based on the work that I do and how I describe myself. There's then detail about the roles I currently perform and where I currently work. And then in summary, there is my past employment here as well. I also publicly talk about my volunteering experience and causes that I belong to. I've purposely kept this information public. The reason you don't see a complete profile is simply because my view is that you don't need to share everything publicly. It's about making sure that you share the appropriate information. But if somebody wants to see my complete profile, firstly, they'd have to be a member of LinkedIn. Secondly, they'd have to be somewhere within my network within LinkedIn, be it first degree, second degree, third degree, or group. So if I just click the green button here to view my full profile, it will now ask me to log in. So I'm going to sign in here. Now today, I'm not actually going to log in as me. I'm going to log in as my wife. And the reason I'm logging in as my wife is because I want to make sure that you see the way in which LinkedIn properly works in the free version, which is what my wife uses. So, if we would go in here, just close this top box down, what we now see is we see my complete profile from within the LinkedIn site. The reason we're able to see this is because my wife is directly connected to me. We can see that by looking on the right-hand side to the right of my name. It refers to me being a first-degree contact of my wife's. But if we were to take the content that appears within my profile, it's something that I've given a great deal of thought about, and it's also something that I change on a regular basis. The first thing, and probably one of the most important things when it comes to your profile, is having a good photograph. The reason a photograph is important is for two simple reasons. Firstly, if you're looking to get back in touch with people you perhaps lost contact with, people are visual at recalling information, so if there's a photograph reminding them as to who you are, they're more likely to remember you. Secondly, if we look across here on the right-hand side, it talks about people similar to Lincoln. It refers to somebody called Ian Appleby, but we can see here there's no photograph. Whereas the next person along, Helen, it says she's a research and information manager, but given that there's an image there, the eye tends to be drawn to it quicker. But equally as well, it's a quick way of working out whether it's somebody you perhaps know or not when looking at an image. So a photograph is a good idea. In terms of types of photographs and styles of photograph, I would recommend not using a wedding photograph. Do not include cigarettes or alcohol in any image. And for some reason at the moment it's becoming very popular to have multiple people in the same photograph. Again, I wouldn't recommend this. So having a single photograph of you that reflects who you are. Now if you're somebody who works perhaps in the sports industry or something that's potentially a little bit different, then having a photograph that reflects that certainly wouldn't do you any harm. But a photograph is important. The second most important thing that comes to your profile is your headline. So my headline reads, Consultant, Advisor, Speaker on Careers, Recruitment Social Media, Official LinkedIn EMEA Talent Solutions Partner. This is something I've created, and I've created it with a purpose. What I mean by this is that the default setting for your headline is it will take the job title and the employer that you have listed as your most recent role. The downside with that is often job titles don't describe who you are nor what you do. And the other important factor here is that actually this information is visible without looking at the person's profile. So if I was to look again across at the right-hand side, this person who's coming up here is somebody called Lisa Marie Kearney. It says she's a Senior Recruitment Officer. That's her headline. That's what it reads as. Now, I've got a rough understanding as to who she is in terms of what she certainly does, but I have no idea of perhaps the industry she operates in or perhaps the level in which she works in as well. So you want to make sure that you tailor your headline to reflect who you are. You know, having a job title that simply says Managing Director isn't enough anymore. You want to have something that describes you. When it comes to your location should be the location you want to be based in, or certainly where you want to be now. Equally with the industry, again, this should either be the industry that you spend most time operating in, or if you perform a function that straddles more than one sector, then choose the industry that relates to the function you perform. So, for example, if you're an accountant, choose accountancy as accountant as the industry, or if you want to solely work in investment banking, make sure that's the sector you choose rather than something else. You can only have one location, and again, you can only have one industry when it comes to your profile, so make sure you choose wisely. But equally, it's something you can amend at any stage. The rest of the summary box we see here just refers to employment, current and past, education as well. We then find two sections. The first is this funny little web link. This web link refers to the public profile of this LinkedIn account. Your public profile is what is visible externally of the website. This is becoming increasingly important because actually a number of organizations are starting to request your public profile URL, particularly headhunters. In the case of Spencer Stewart and Russell Reynolds, they're now asking people to provide them as a headhunter with the web link for their profile as a way to be kept up to date with the information. Across on the right, we see here it says contact info. Make sure that the contact information that appears within your profile is information you're happy to share. So what we've got here is we've got a Skype address, we've got multiple email accounts, and we've got a telephone number. This information is only visible to people that you're connected to. So the reason Anne can see this is because we're directly connected. The information below the line, however, which refers to website and Twitter, this is something that's public. Anybody who's viewing this profile can see this information. So again, you want to make sure that you're sharing the right type of information with your network. Further down, we then start to see activity that I've been doing. So an hour ago, I commented on a poll. 21 hours ago, I had some skills endorsed. Further down, we then start to find my summary. Now, most people's summary is often a variation of their CV. They'll perhaps take the profile statement, the first paragraph from the CV, and copy that across. Now, as to what you say within your profile, it's entirely up to you. But the important thing is to make sure that you represent yourself in an appropriate fashion for the industry that you're interested in. The other thing is that actually this is the first thing that organizations, recruiters, headhunters, or prospective clients will typically look at. They want to understand how skilled you are in something. They want to understand how long you've operated in a particular field or area. So you want to be demonstrating the who you are and the what you do. It's often more than the profile of a CV, and the reason it's often more is simply you're allowed to type in more information and create more content. And it's a good idea to make sure if there are particular things that you want to focus on, do so by setting individual paragraphs for each important message. Further down within your profile, it's then about what you want to say about yourself. So we've got here with an experience. This is where you will list the employer that you've got, the job title associated with that employer, and also how long you've been employed by that company, whether it's your own business or whether it's another organization that you work on behalf of. When we look at profiles, we'll sometimes see an image relating to the employer. The reason the image appears, that means there is a company page or a company profile within the site as well. So if you have your own business, one of the things you might want to look to do is create a company page within LinkedIn as a way to be able to describe your organization in more detail. And I'll show you how to do that shortly. But the most important thing when it comes to your profile regarding your experience is about making sure that whatever you state in your summary, you're backing up through the employment that you say within your profile. My personal opinion is that everything you say on your CV in terms of employer names, dates, job titles should match your profile. However, don't go into any detail about jobs you no longer wish to do or have no bearing on the future that you're looking at. The reason for not going into the detail about things that are less relevant is because your profile is keyword searchable. So it's important to make sure that you include the relevant and right information to be seen by potential companies if you want to use it as a way to be found, or equally make sure that actually for prospective customers you talk about the different services you offer or perhaps the different types of involvement that you have in terms of your experiences. When it comes to things such as volunteering causes, it can be a nice way to talk about things that are as close to your heart. And then it comes to a section that here is called skills and expertise. Now, skills and expertise isn't new. It was first launched in June last year. The idea behind skills and expertise was to allow you as an individual to highlight particular keywords relating to your skills and experiences. You typed in the skill that you had. You were then able to click onto that skill and state what your level of competency was based on your own opinion, and also how long you felt you'd been skilled in that particular area. The problem with it, however, was that people would type in the keyword, but they wouldn't backfill it with the information stating how competent they were or how long they'd had that skill for. So in November last year, LinkedIn created a system called Endorsements. The principle behind it was that if you look at somebody you're connected to, you're able to endorse them for particular skills or expertise, either they state or you're able to add in additional skills that you think they might have. It becomes a mini 360. Now, the important things here are that firstly, this information again is keyword searchable. The second reason this information is important is it will have bearing on the way in which LinkedIn works with you. What I mean by this is that LinkedIn will often recommend jobs or opportunities that might be of interest to you. It will base it on the job title that you have. It will perhaps base it on some of the information you say about yourself, but it will also base it on what your network says you're good at. So it's important to make sure that the skills and expertise you have listed under here truly relate to who you are and what you do. You can list up to 50. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. but it's important to perhaps have the key expertise and the key skills that you wish to be known for featured highly on your profile. The other thing as well is that when somebody endorses you for a particular area, they do so publicly. What I mean by this is if I hover across my most recent one, so Lexi here, she endorsed me for recruiting. You're able to see that Lexi was the person who endorsed me. We don't know the basis of the endorsements. We don't know what the relationship is, but we know that Lexi's willing to say, I'm good at that area. It doesn't necessarily mean it's something that I want to be overly known for, but it means people in my network are able to see what I potentially am good at based on my network's view. If we look further down, it then talks about education. So again, it's appropriate to make sure that you highlight the key things that are relevant to you. We then go into recommendations. Now, recommendations are something that are provided to you as an individual by somebody you're directly connected to. It can only come from a direct connection. For anybody out there who's looking to perhaps sell themselves, not necessarily for the purpose of being found for a job, but more importantly perhaps to back up the type of role in which you do, i.e. you're good at what you do, it's a good idea to have recommendations from people that you've both worked alongside and perhaps worked for. It becomes a public endorsement. Now, some employers nowadays don't like individuals giving recommendations, but one way around this is to make sure you just simply state this is your personal opinion. Recommendations, though, are a great way, again, to highlight or be verified, rather, by your network in terms of who you are and, again, what you do. I know a number of organizations take recommendations very seriously. Certainly, there's an assumption that if you've got, let's say, for example, 500 plus people in your network, but nobody has recommended you, they'll often query as to why. Beyond recommendations, we'll start to fall into what's referred to as connections. So if you're connected to somebody based on either direct or indirect, you will always be able to see the basis of the relationship, both who you share in common. So in this case, my wife also is connected to Joe on LinkedIn as well as I am. What you're also able to do is you're able to see the groups that the individual belongs to as well. You're also able to see the news that the person follows and also the companies that the individual follows as well. Companies and news is public. When you as a user follow a news stream or follow a particular organization, that information can be visible to anybody within your network, and also in the case of employers, it's visible to the company that you follow. When it comes to groups, however, you are able, if you wish, to hide the fact that you belong to a group. It's something you can do under settings, and perhaps it might be relevant, particularly if you're joining groups that are potentially slightly outside of the norm. But I would recommend there are 3 types of groups you should join. The first is validation. So for those of you who are not yet a member of the Imperial Alumni Group, I'd highly recommend you join, because it validates then your attendance at the school. Secondly, I'd recommend you join groups that relate to your interests, and your interests in a work context. So if you're looking to be fed particular information, if you want to be seen to be as somebody who knows what they're talking about in particular chosen fields, join those groups as a way to be kept up to date with what's happening. The third type of group to join are interest groups, and what I mean by that is proper interest. It's not just about you as an individual in a corporate sense, it can also be about you as an individual in a personal sense. If you involved in green issues, and it's nothing to do with work, but it's something that you're proud of and you like to talk about, join the groups relating to that. I was working with somebody recently who was passionate about real tennis. He decided to then join the Real Tennis group on LinkedIn. There's only about 1,500 members. But the advantage of doing so was that it was nothing to do with the work context. It was just he shared interests with other people who were also passionate about real tennis. The reason that was most useful is because it gave him access to people he wouldn't necessarily otherwise know. So it's a good idea to think about the groups in which you belong to. Now, in terms of the way in which you go about editing or amending your profile, it's as simple as across the top, under Profile, you have the Edit Profile option. Now, because we're logged in as my wife, we're going to see a slightly different profile here now. So, first things first, when we're in the Edit option, up pops this funny little box, that says, Peter and Christine have endorsed my wife for wills and trusts. This relates to key skills or expertise that she doesn't yet feature within her profile, but they've decided to state that she has this skill or expertise. Now, you've got the ability, if you wish, to not accept them by simply choosing the little X beside them. Alternatively, if you're happy to be endorsed for that particular skill or expertise, you can add them to your profile, and it will then sit further down. What the system will then do is it will encourage you as a user to then start to, in turn, endorse people back. So it says here, does Caroline Burbridge know about intellectual property? If my wife felt that she knew Caroline did, she could endorse her for that skill. Alternatively, close the box, it will pop up somebody else that they would recommend instead. But it's more about you as an individual. This is what's important. If we start looking at my wife's profile, the first thing, if we need to make any amendments, should she choose to, is simply go to the funny little blue icon, looks like a crayon, simply select Edit here. You're then able to go in and amend the information. Alternatively, if you wish to amend what's available to Google in terms of your public link, simply choose Edit here. It will then take us to a new heading that allows us to go in and say, what information are we happy to have publicly visible? If there are certain things we don't, we can deselect those. As soon as you deselect, it automatically amends the information. What you also can do under here is what's referred to as customize your public profile URL. The advantage of doing so with this is that you can tailor how the web link looks that positions your information to the internet. And if you create it where it's more customized, i.e. to you as an individual, firstly, it becomes better searchable via search engines, so you're more likely to feature at the top when somebody performs a Google search, for example. What also happens is you can use it for other reasons, for other purposes. So it's not uncommon nowadays for people to take their full LinkedIn link and then use it as part of an email signature or perhaps a business card. So it's a good way to be able to show that you know what you're doing when it comes to LinkedIn, but more importantly, have something that's memorable. In terms of editing the rest of the information within your profile, it's as simple as go to the section that's relevant. If you want to add a new position, simply add position, type in the name of the company, the title, where you've performed the job, and then the description that you want to provide for it. As I say here, bearing in mind, you want to make sure that you focus on what's relevant and important to you. So if you performed a job 10 years ago that's no longer relevant to your career, make reference to it, but don't necessarily provide a description to it. When it comes to skills and expertise, again here, you're able to go in and amend any time you wish. So we can simply take away things for which she's been endorsed for if they're no longer relevant. So you can always control how you're viewed within the site. If, for example, when it comes to things such as certificates, education, or actual fact employment, if you've got more than one thing that's current, we can see here the funny little up-down arrows. It allows us to move the information around. So you can reorder things such as your education, or your certificates, or interests, or in actual fact, the whole thing. So if your education is more important than your work career, you can literally pick it up and move it further up your profile if you wish. So you can really play with the information that exists within your profile. You have full control when it comes to the information. Further down, it's then about what do you want to disclose. So again, the relevant information for you. Now, the question that's just come in is about how do you go about updating your profile without telling your network? It's a good question. In the top right-hand corner, we can see here my wife's name highlighted in white. And it's the same for everybody who uses LinkedIn. Under here, the first option is Settings. At this point, it encourages me to just re-enter the password in case we've signed out or not been using it long enough. What we've got here, though, is this is the back end of LinkedIn. The first thing we can come to in the center refers to privacy controls. Activity broadcasts is this piece of information that you share to your network. By deselecting the box it prevents that information from being broadcast to your network. Now, the information that's broadcast out, as it says there, is when you make a change to your profile, perhaps when you connect to somebody, when you get recommendations or make recommendations, when you get endorsements or make endorsements, and also when you follow a company. If you don't want the information being shared, simply untick that box. What I would also recommend, though, is that if you're amending the information you're broadcasting out to your network, I'd also suggest you look at this section here called Activity Feed. Your activity feed is simply that. It's a summary providing your recent activity within LinkedIn. Again, you can set that so that everyone can see it, only your network, only your connections, or just you. If you're conscious that you're making lots of amendments and changes and perhaps don't want the information to be shared, again, then I'd suggest your activity feed is set as only you. So the first two sections under privacy are relevant when it comes to making sure that you're not displaying information or sharing information if you don't want it to. And the thing with it as well is that, it's not so much necessarily minor edits in terms of the information that's shared out. So if you put a bullet point in or you change your punctuation, that's not shared. But if you make a significant change, adding a new section, providing a description, changing some dates, then that information does go out. So before you go about amending your profile, if you don't want your network to be told you're doing things, make sure you go to the settings option in the top right-hand corner. So in terms of LinkedIn, we're making an assumption here now. You've built a good profile. In my opinion, a good profile will probably take you a couple of hours to think about. It takes about 45 minutes to actually build, but you do want to make sure that you position the information accordingly. If you're perhaps looking to be seen to be doing something that you don't really do, and what I mean by that is you might be moving into a new field, you might have a new area of interest, often coming up with the information that best describes how you want to position yourself could be quite difficult. What I would recommend at this point is actually to go to the jobs section within LinkedIn. Under Find Jobs, what I would suggest you do is search for a job that's of relevance based on keywords or phrases. So if my wife decided she wanted to be a marketing director, type in marketing director as the keyword, hit search, back comes jobs advertised within LinkedIn that relates to being a marketing director. What she's then able to do is click on the job. She'll then see the description of the role, but more importantly, the desired skills and experiences. It's a great way to help you understand language. So you might phrase something in one way, but in actual fact, it's more commonly phrased in another way. So using job ads is a great way to make sure you position the information on your profile in a relevant way. So I'd certainly suggest using those. But let's make the assumption you've built a really good profile. The next step is about building a network. Under under contacts rather at the top, you'll find an option that says Add Connections. This will encourage you as a user to import contacts from an email address. Now, in theory, there is nothing wrong with doing this. However, what I would suggest you do is make sure you only import contacts that are appropriate. By that, I mean Hotmail, Yahoo, Gmail often store any email address you've ever sent an email to as a contact. So if you import everything that you've ever sent an email to into LinkedIn, it perhaps will import things that are less relevant. What your better option may be to do then instead is go to any email. Under here, you've got the ability to upload a contacts file. So what you're able to do is you could export your Outlook or perhaps your Apple contacts or your Hotmail or Yahoo into an Excel spreadsheet. Delete all the contacts that you don't necessarily want to be in connection with, and then upload that file as either a .csv, .text, or a .vcf. The big advantage of doing this is then you're importing the email addresses of the people that you want to get hold of. LinkedIn will then look at the email addresses that you've imported, it will look within the 225 million people that use it, and it will then show you whether that email address exists within LinkedIn or not. If it exists, it will then suggest that you may wish to send them an invitation. At this point, you don't have to. It's entirely up to you. But it's a great way to help you work out who you know across the site. Alternatively, the better option might just simply be to go to the search box in the right-hand corner. To the right of this, go to Advanced, and then search for the individual that you're looking to try and track down. Now, the default setting for LinkedIn is it will search within your first degree, second degree, and group only. But if you're looking for somebody who you're perhaps not connected to, You also want to make sure that you search third and everyone else. You're then able to use the search boxes on the left-hand side. So let's say, for example, I was looking for somebody called John Smith in the UK. It tells me there are 4,500 people called John Smith. What we're then able to do is use keywords as a way to summarize down to the person that we're interested in. So if we take marketing as a keyword, rerun the search, we now go down to 122. If we then search, let's say, for example, by an employer, we've now got 2 individuals within LinkedIn. It will show you whether the person is in your network already or not. So this person here, John Smith, who's a director of a company called Risk Factor, is a 3rd-degree contact of my wife's. John R. Smith, who's a sourcing lead at IBM, though, is out of my wife's network. I can see this because there is no symbol whatsoever to the person's name, next to the person's name. If you've looked for somebody by their first and second name, you're able to send them an invite, even if they're outside of your network. However, if my wife was to have looked for somebody called John, who's in marketing, who used to or currently works for IBM, the results would look very different. Firstly, people who are a 3rd-degree connection, we wouldn't be able to see their surname. The reason this is blocked is it prevents people from being able to work out potential email addresses for people. The other factor, though, is that if we go further afield in my wife's network, this person coming back here at the top, John, who's a senior sales and marketing professional, it states that they're a LinkedIn member. So they fall outside of my wife's network. As a result, she's not able to send an invitation to connect because she's not looked for the person by name. So if you want to get back in touch with somebody, you need to make sure you know their first and last name. Otherwise, it will never give you the opportunity to send them an invitation to connect. But let's make an assumption that my wife does know somebody on here. So let's go back a couple of pages. So let's take somebody who's close to her network. So first result, we had at the top somebody called John Noakes. So it says John Noakes, who now works for Microsoft. It says there's one shared connection. So Oliver knows John. Oliver also knows Anne. We don't know the basis of Oliver and John's relationship, but certainly we know why Anne knows Oliver because she's connected to him. But because it's a 2nd-degree contact, it means we can send that individual an invitation to connect. We then need to state why and how we know them, and then always personalize the invitation. Never send a non-personalized invite. This is really important, particularly if you're getting back in contact with people you've perhaps not spoken with for a while. Once the invite is sent, it will then suggest other people that you may well know, based on either you know people in common, you worked for the same company at the same period of time, or perhaps you studied at the same place. The last option will be because you've imported their email address and you've yet to send them an invitation. It will provide you with that list there. It's a good way to be able to act as a memory jog, working out who you might know. Now that's only the first step when it comes to connections. The second step is actually once that connection has been made, you want to start to manage and use your contacts in a nice way. What I mean by this is if we go to contacts and connections, it will now list all the contacts that my wife has within LinkedIn. Hopefully. Here we are. So my wife is connected to 87 different people. Now, we can see here on the left-hand side, it talks about tags. Tags are automatically generated based on the way in which an invitation is sent or received within LinkedIn. If we look at Mark, for example, it says the tag is a partner. But that might not be the case. It might be that actually Mark is something different. So let's say, for example, Mark might be a recruiter. So what we're able to do is we're able to go in and edit the tag, creating a new option, adding it in, and then taking them out of the old field. You can create any tag you wish, and you can have multiple tags for the same person. The big advantage for having tags is it allows you to separate out the different people within your network and basically provide the context as to why you know them. What also happens is if you have a tag where the membership is less than 100, you're able to go to that tag and send that tag a message at the same time. So let's say from a business development perspective, you might be tagged to prospects, or perhaps you met somebody at an event. You can tag people based on that event, or the type of prospect they might be. You can then go to that tag, choose send a message. It will then construct a communication within LinkedIn. You can then choose your subject line, personalize the message, and then you can send it to each of those individuals. So it will allow you to push a message out to people that you want to get in contact with. And it can be about anything. The message itself will then go not only just to their LinkedIn account, it will also push out to their email address that they use for LinkedIn as well. So they'll receive it via their Outlook or home email address. So it's a great way to be able to push a message to a targeted group. Separating out and tagging your contacts takes time, but I'd highly recommend you do it because it's a great way to work out who you know and how you know them. And also the important thing here as well is that by editing the tag of the individual, they don't know how you've categorized them. That being said, always make sure you're polite. But it's a great way to separate your network. Further down within connections though, it will talk about companies. So it will list organizations where you know people. It will also list by location, and it will also list by industry. And again, in a similar vein, you're able to click on that industry, and again, as long as the listing is less than 100, you can again send that population a message. So if you've got a particular message that you want to broadcast out to a particular sector, you can push it out, irrespective of what their job might be. So, build a good profile, build a good network in terms of direct connections. The next thing I'd recommend you do is join groups. As I mentioned already, the 3 types of groups are very much around validation, interest in terms of your industry or sector, and also interest groups. There are 1.6, almost 1.7 million groups within LinkedIn. The largest group we can see here listed at the top is a thing called Job Openings, Job Leads, Job Connections. It has 1.3 million members. Just because it's big doesn't mean it's great. The best thing to do is to make sure that you focus on groups that are of most relevance to you. So, using keywords, you can look to track down groups that are of relevance to you. 62 groups coming back relating to Imperial Business. We've then got the various groups. We will always be able to see how many people within your network belong to the group, how many discussions have been started, and also what the total membership is. So it's a great way to be able to identify whether it's a group of relevance to you or not, particularly looking at the people who belong to it based on your network. You can click on the title of the group and understand more about it. So what's the purpose and what's the point? And also more importantly, you can see who owns it and also who manages the group. Again, this is a great way to be able to validate to make sure that you've got the right type of group that you're going to be joining. At the point in which you request, it's up to the manager or the owner to allow you to then join. It will then give you access to the information and the insight. So my wife belongs to a group called UK Solicitors and Lawyers. If you look at the group here, because she's a member, she's able to see what's being discussed. She's also able to see the other members of the groups. The members, there are 4,000, because they're fellow members, you're able to look within the group for people that are of interest who also belong to the group. So if my wife was interested in tracking down people who talk about Evershed somewhere within their profile, it goes from 4,000 to 32 by simply adding in one keyword. What will then come back is a list of who those individuals are. We will only see the person's name if they're a first or a second degree connection. If they're further afield, we'll only see the first initial. However, we will be able to see some information about the person based on who they are. The reason we're not able to see the full profile is because this individual has locked their profile down, and it's something that they can do in terms of their settings. However, if we wanted to talk to Ainsland, as a member of the group, we're able to send them a message provided they allow it. So we can push a message to Ainsland based on the fact that she also belongs to this group. The message can be about anything. They would receive it where it states a fellow member of the group that they both belong to has pushed the message to them. They would then see whatever message was listed below. So if you want to target particular individuals for your organization who you're really interested in, let's say, for example, heads of function, join the groups where those people are likely to be based. You can then search within them for the people that match what you're interested in and then send a message to them. It's a great way to be able to push that information out. So you can really be able to target the right types of individuals. But one of the things I'd suggest is when you join a group, make sure you set your settings for that group. You can join 50 groups, and the default setting is you receive a daily email from the group. You might not want that, in which case perhaps choose it to weekly, or if you wish, turn the whole thing off. It's your choice. But always make sure that you choose how you want to be using it, because you don't want to be flooded with messages that are irrelevant. So set your settings accordingly. But join groups relating to the areas that are of interest to you. Obviously, as a fellow member of a group, you can also start a discussion. You can also create a poll. A poll is a fantastic way to be able to get insight from members within the group without necessarily overtly selling something. It could simply be, what's the top 5 things or what's the 10 things that you're interested in for your future business. It's a great way to be able to get opinion from the people that belong to the group. And also it's a great way to be able to promote yourself within the group. So use groups as a way to gather insight, share insight, track down people that are of interest to you. You'll also perhaps find within the group there might be a job section, and this entirely depends on the group owner or group manager as to how this is run. But what this will do is it will feed in jobs that are advertised within the group, within LinkedIn. It will also feed in job discussions, which come from fellow members of the group. It's something that they will only share within this group itself. So again, if you're interested in particular jobs, because you're looking to use this for job search, join the groups relating to the job you want to perform. So certainly work your way through it. We've already touched on jobs, so there's not much else to say here other than perform keyword searches based on jobs or job titles you're interested in. When it comes to your inbox, you've got 2 subparts within here. The first are messages, the second are invites. The important factor here is when it comes to invitations, what I would recommend is that if you don't know the person, but they look to be interesting for whatever reason, rather than accepting the invite, you can go back with a message. I would always reply and send messages back to people. Whether you know them or not, it's always a good way to make sure that actually they could be useful, they could be interesting, and particularly if they haven't personalized the invite, I'd always go back. So it might be something like, thanks very much for the invitation, happy to have a conversation with you about what you're asking, here's my details, or alternatively it could be go back and say, is there a particular reason as to why you chose to connect? You can control the way in which you deal with the information. So worthwhile doing. Moving on, you'll then find companies. Within the company section, this is where you'll find the 2.9 million companies within LinkedIn. Type in the name of an organization you're interested in. You're then able to see information about them. Whether it's a large organization, so let's take GKN for example, we can get an about them. We can see who you know based on your network who works for the company. You're also able to gather insight information on the organization. So people with new job titles, people who used to work for the organization, and also other organizations associated with the company, and equally where people have come from in terms of employment career. Now, let's say you've got your own business. What you're able to do here is if we go back to the search option, on the right-hand side, you have the ability to add a company. Adding a company literally is that. You can add the organization name, the email address of the company. It has to be an email address you have attached to your profile. LinkedIn will then validate it. It will then allow you to build a company page. Now, company pages will allow you to be able to go in and amend or edit the information. So, my wife has control of the organization she works for. She's able to then edit the way in which the company describes themselves. So the company description. She's also able to upload images, upload logos, talk about the specialities of the company. If there are featured groups relating to the organization, they can display them here as well. You can provide location details, more than one office. You can provide website and general information. You're also able to talk about the different services you offer as an organization. You're also able to then add additional services within this. You can talk about different categories, different topics. You can have different images for different topics. So you can really start to sell your organization in terms of what you do as a company. All this information we're seeing here is completely free of charge. So there's no payment necessary to be able to build a very good, comprehensive company page, providing good overview, insight in terms of who you are as an organization. What you're also able to do as part of it is you're able to feed news, press, and interesting information. So if you're looking to use it for business development, what I would highly recommend you do is make sure you have a good company page within LinkedIn established, because given this is going to be a point of reference for you as an organization. Now, getting very conscious with time, but there's one very key thing that I want to focus on now. Under news, there's a thing called Signal. Signal is something that's relatively new. It's been around for a while, but the principle behind Signal is it allows you to look across your network at things that are being disclosed or discussed publicly. It basically takes the activity broadcasts which are being shared. What you're able to do is you're able to choose the level of your network from which you want to see the information. You're then able to perform keyword searches across the top to track down particular things. So going back to an earlier piece around marketing director, if I type in marketing director in speech marks and perform a search, it comes back with nothing. Let's change it again then. Take it as two separate words. We've now got 11,000 updates. 20 of which are coming from somebody that Anne knows through somebody else. 10,000 are coming from everybody else. But what we're able to do is we're able to go through and say, well, I'm interested in marketing director updates relating to the UK, specifically London. So we go from 11,000 to 300. We can then go down and say, I'm only interested in people who've updated a certain portion of their profile, whether it's profile, group, or a piece of information that's been shared. Information that's typically shared tends to be, as we can see here, a job. So here's a job. Or further down, it could be a piece of information in terms of news or press. Alternatively, it might be that we're interested in people who've recently been promoted to a marketing director, in which case we can take profile rather than share information. And we can see the people who've recently been promoted to that job title or job that relates to the keywords you search by. So if you need to track down particular people who perform a particular job and you're really keen to talk to them when they first start their position, it's a great way through Signal to be able to search for specific individuals you're interested in. It's almost like a mini Twitter within LinkedIn, where it's sharing the information within your network in terms of what's being disclosed. Whereas obviously when it comes to Twitter, it's something far more public in terms of the information that's being shared. But the reason we can see this is because the person is somewhere within your network. Now, we've come to an end, unfortunately, in terms of running out of time. Just want to quickly, does anybody have a particular question? I see there's a couple of questions come around in terms of tagging. So yeah, there isn't really a limit, though. The maximum I typically use is 5 or 6 tags when it comes to my connections. I can see a question as well in terms of white papers. If you want to publish or push out a white paper or a press release, there are two easy ways in which you can go about doing it. The first is if you have a company page, as we looked earlier. So in the case of my wife, under Girlings, what she's able to do is share an update on behalf of the company. That gets pushed to all the followers, or it can be pushed to a targeted audience if there are enough followers within LinkedIn for the company. By going here, it's then freely available, or publicly available rather, for anybody who uses LinkedIn. What you can also do though, is under your home page, you can share your own update. But this update itself, again, will either go to just your connections, so first degree only, or to LinkedIn, or if you use Twitter, you can push it out to Twitter as well as sharing it within LinkedIn. So you can push out white papers, web links to particular pieces of information or content, press releases or otherwise, either via the company or via your individual profile as sharing the information. The big advantage to doing that is obviously it pushes the message out. What I'd also suggest though is you perhaps maybe share the information within relevant groups based on your target audience as well. Another question that's come in talks about the iPad revealing who's viewed your profile. What you've got is when you use LinkedIn, when you look at somebody's profile, you leave behind a trace that you've looked at them. And if you look here on the home page, on the right-hand side, it talks about who's viewed your profile. So it says 5 people have looked at my wife's profile in the last 15 days. If you use LinkedIn for free, you're only able to view the last couple of people, typically within the last few days, who've looked at somebody's profile. You're also able to see the number of views over a 90-day period. You're also able to view the appearances in search. But you can only see this if you make yourself public when you view other people's profiles. If, however, you want to get more advanced information, unfortunately, this is something you would have to pay for. Whether you pay for it as a individual in terms of the job section, or whether you pay for it as a corporate subscriber. Another question that's come in is around the photographs. In terms of whether it should be casual or formal, the biggest thing for me is about making sure it's a headshot, i.e. something where people can see you. Whether it's casual or formal, it's entirely your choice, but it just needs to be appropriate for the audience. You know, if you're somebody who's well known for drinking coffee and being in coffee shops all the time, then yeah, by all means have a photograph with you, perhaps with a coffee mug. But I wouldn't recommend anything where there's multiple shots of individuals. I certainly wouldn't recommend having photographs where you're staring into a webcam. It looks a little bit scary. But it's a good idea to have something that's appropriate for you. Whether that's casual or formal, it's entirely your choice. But it needs to be something that's clear. If you're going with a black and white image, be very careful with light and dark, because if half of your face is in shade, it can be very difficult to see your photo. But personally, it's more important to make sure that you have a photograph that's appropriate for your sector. Yeah.
I think we've run over time, which I think that's the first time we've done that. But there was just so much to go through that it was a shame to cut off Lincoln so that we would have missed out on some of the information he had to share with us. So that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. And please fill in the questionnaire or the survey that comes in as soon as you at the end of this webinar. We really want to have your feedback. And I almost think there's probably a level 2 that we need from Lincoln. So if you have any ideas around that and a burning question that wasn't answered, please let us know to help us develop our future webinar offer. That's all great, and here is his Lincoln's LinkedIn account, and I'm sure he's happy to connect with you and answer any further questions. So I think that's probably all. Just remember that next week is a busy week for the school. If you want to and are able to pop in on the 23rd of May, there is both a research festival with some keynote speakers. There's an Imperial Insights evening on the 23rd, and there's a healthcare sector interest group. So we've got 3 things on one day, which will all be good to see and depend on your sector of interest. And of course, the alumni summer reception is on the 14th of June, and we hope to see many of you there. Otherwise, I look forward to you registering for the next webinar, and thank you very much.